Looking at the choice. Yeah, choice. Yeah. It was terrible too, right? So they were like, how do you put it? Looking at us as, sorts of slave coming for soldiers. So after the students kicked out the mostly it's only the same area they were gathering capturing people with their service. That's where community power comes from. That's how they get divided. But then agents will always have to hide regarding water. I don't know how many before it was what was it? Oh, like they were like have a certain independent. Yeah.
Where'd you buy these?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. The South. Yeah, that's us. Yeah.
So I'm not sure what was the status.
Yeah.
No. No, yeah, I found these on commercial, but they had run out. I haven't been going down to.
But before that,
Haven't it?
No, I
Sudan.
don't have any real business.
For independent
Historical area.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, but no, I'm gonna. I gave it a 2-month break. I recommended it. I said a month. She said 2 months. And then I'm gonna send her a really bad email. I hope that.
Yeah.
If I
So
have,
at that time, they were pretty independent till
if I have it.
Columbus came from 14 something. From 14 something, that's when
But I've discovered something.
The books, yeah. Okay, everyone. Welcome to the International LaRouche Movement BC chapter for October 24th. We're expecting actually quite a few more people. They're going to be trickling in, but in any case, we are going to get going because it's after 7. So we have quite an interesting evening for you. Both the international geopolitical situation, which Paul will, of course, enlighten us about, is steadfastly increasing in. Well, there's a lot of movement in the right direction, put it that way. But there's lots to consider in that. The other part of this evening will be a presentation by myself about the Canadian election. And I think I can speak for most people here, especially probably the majority of Canadians, as evidenced by the outcome that collectively we're all breathing a sigh of relief that Harper did not get in. And I don't think that was even fully appreciated until after he got out, until we found out for sure that he was not going to be the prime minister. Right. So there's a process of discussion going on amongst in our local movement and elsewhere about the elections, about what the significance of Trudeau's majority government. And so what I'll be doing after Paul's presentation is bringing you all in on that internal discussion about what's happening. But we're going to do it after Paul's presentation. But it is a discussion process. It is by no means definitive or conclusive, but it is it is an ideas process of really discovering, because we don't have a manual, we don't have these things, lined out for us in black and white. We have to be a part of a process of figuring this out. And so within the context, we're going to be discussing the Canadian elections within the context of the global strategic situation, and especially what's going on in the United States and Canada's relationship to the United States. So it is within that context that we'll be talking about it later. And really, that's the only way you can look at it. I often say this, if you're going to try and understand what's going on in Canadian politics from the perspective of either the newspapers or their platforms or being involved even in the parties, I guarantee you none of it will make any sense. And it really, you have to be able to take a perspective from a different level to really be able to understand where it's going. So I'll be getting into that afterwards, but in the meantime, Paul will be giving us the strategic situation. And also, we don't have as many new ones, unfortunately, but we do have a couple of new Canadian Patriots. One on the cover is Republic or Colony. That is one of the more recent ones, I believe. And then as well, we have a few of the newer EIRs, which are very good, just to peruse out there. So
Can I
I'll
ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
I wasn't following that closely, but Justin Trudeau refused to give his position on TPP until after the election. Is that right?
You know what? I don't know all the. Yes, he was very vague on it.
Yeah.
But I'm going to challenge
Okay.
everybody just to hold off until after Paul, because there's lots of questions and there's a ton of stuff to go over. So, yeah. Okay, Paul.
Right. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. I want to start the meeting by focusing on the presentation by Vladimir Putin a few days ago at the Valdai Club conference. Now, this has been a conference that meets, it's a discussion group, but it really is about policy. And a lot of people get invited to come to this conference, and there's discussions throughout the day. But it generally is opened by Putin, who gives the opening address. And this conference comes at a point following September 30th, when the Russian military activities began to back up the beginning of the takedown of Daesh in the Middle East. Now, this is the first full statement by Putin about why he's doing what he's doing, what's the intention behind what he's doing, what is this all about. And I don't ever do this, but I'm going to do it tonight. I'm going to read you the transcript of the speech as it appeared on the SACR website. I don't usually do this. I don't like to do this, but I think this is significant. I'm going to read it, bear with me. And then I'll get to the actual discussion of this and what I think the significance of this is. And this is very significant. It's not like Putin is saying something new, but he's like putting it all together as a whole in this situation. So, allow me to greet you here at this regular meeting of the Valdai International Club. It is true that for over 10 years now, this has been a platform to discuss the most pressing issues and consider the directions and prospects for development of Russia and the whole world. The participants change, of course, but overall, the discussion platform remains its core, so to speak. We have turned into a kind of mutually understanding environment. We have an open discussion here. This is an open intellectual platform for an exchange of views, assessments, and forecasts that are very important for us here in Russia. I would like to thank all the Russian and foreign politicians, experts, public figures, and journalists taking part in the work of this club. This year, the discussion focuses on the issue of war and peace. This topic has clearly been the concern of humanity throughout its history. Back in ancient times, in antiquity, people argued about the nature, the causes of conflicts, about the fair and unfair use of force, whether wars would always accompany the development of civilization, broken only by ceasefires, or would the time come when arguments and conflicts are resolved without war. I'm sure you recall our great writer Leo Tolstoy here in the great novel War and Peace. He wrote that the war contradicted human reason and human nature, while peace, in his opinion, was good for people. True. Peace, a peaceful life, has always been humanity's ideal. State figures, philosophers, and lawyers have often come up with models for a peaceful interaction between nations. Various conditions and alliances declared their goal was to ensure strong, lasting peace, as they used to say. However, the problem was that they often turned to war as a way to resolve the accumulated contradictions, while war itself served as a means for establishing new post-war hierarchies in the world. Okay. Meanwhile, peace as a state of world politics has never been stable and did not come of itself. Periods of peace in both European and world history were always been based on securing and maintaining the existing balance of forces. This happened in the 17th century in the times of the so-called Peace of Westphalia, which put an end to the 30 Years' War. Then came the 19th century in the time of the Vienna Congress, and again 70 years ago in Yalta, when the victors over Nazism made the decision to set up the United Nations Organization and lay down the principles of relations between states. With the appearance of nuclear weapons, it became clear that there could be no winner in a global conflict. There can only be one end, guaranteed mutual destruction. It so happened that in its attempt to create ever more destructive weapons, humanity has made any big war pointless. Incidentally, the world leaders of the 1950s, the 1960s, the 1970s, and even the 1980s did treat the use of armed forces as an exceptional measure. In this sense, they behaved responsibly, weighing all the circumstances and possible consequences. The end of the Cold War put an end to ideological opposition, but the basis for arguments and geopolitical conflicts remain. All states have always had and will encourage to have their own diverse interests, while the course of world history has always been accompanied by competition between nations and their alliances. In my view, this is absolutely natural. The main thing is to ensure that this competition develops within the framework of fixed political, legal, and moral norms and rules. Otherwise, competitions and conflicts of interest may lead to acute crises and dramatic outbursts. We have seen this happen many times in the past. Today, unfortunately, we have again come across similar situations. Attempts to promote a model of unilateral domination, as I have said on numerous occasions, have led to an imbalance in the system of international law and global regulation, which means there is a threat and political, economic, or military competition may get out of control. What, for instance, could such uncontrolled competition mean for the international security? A growing number of regional conflicts, especially in border areas where the interests of major nations or blocs meet. This can also lead to the probable downfall of the system of non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, which I also consider to be very dangerous, which in turn would result in a new spiral of the arms race. We have already seen the appearance of the concept of the so-called disarming first strike including one with the high-precision long-range nuclear weapons comparable in their effect to nuclear weapons. The use of the threat of a nuclear missile attack from Iran as an excuse, as we know, has destroyed the fundamental basis of modern international security, the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. The United States has unilaterally seceded from the treaty. Incidentally, today we have resolved the Iranian issue, and there is no threat from Iran, and never has been, just as we said. The thing that seemed to have led our American partners to build an anti-missile defense system is gone. It would be reasonable to work to develop the U.S. anti-missile defense system to come to an end as well. What is actually happening? Nothing of the kind, or actually the opposite. Everything continues. Recently, the United States conducted their first test of the anti-missile defense system in Europe. What does this mean? It means we are right when we argued that our American partners, they were simply trying yet to mislead us and the whole world. To put it plainly, they were lying. It was not about the hypothetical Iranian threat, which never existed. It was about an attempt to destroy the strategic balance, to change the balance of forces in their favor, not only to dominate, but to have the opportunity to dictate their will to their geopolitical competition, and I believe their allies as well. This is a very dangerous scenario, harmful to all, including, in my opinion, to the United States. The nuclear deterrent lost its value. Some probably even had an illusion that victory of one party in the world conflict was again possible, without irreversible, unacceptable, as experts say, consequences for the winner, if there ever is one. In the past 25 years, the threshold for the use of force has gone down noticeably. The anti-war immunity we had acquired after 2 world wars, which we had on a subconscious psychological level, has become weaker. The very perception of war has changed for TV viewers. It is becoming has not become an entertainment media picture. If nobody dies in combat, as if people do not suffer, and cities and entire states are not destroyed. Unfortunately, military terminology is becoming part of everyday life. Thus, trade and sanction wars have become today's global economic reality. This has become a set phrase used by the media. The sanctions, meanwhile, are often used also as an instrument of unfair competition to put pressure on our completely throw competition out of the market. As for example, I could take the outright epidemic of fines imposed on companies, including European ones, by the United States. Flimsy pretexts are being used, and all those who dare violate the unilateral American sanctions are severely punished. You know, this may not be Russia's business, but in this discussion club, therefore I will ask, is that the way to treat one's allies? No, this is how one treats vassals who dare to act as they wish. They are being punished for misbehaving. Last year, the fine was imposed on a French bank to the total of $9 billion. I believe Toyota paid $1.2 billion, while the German Commerzbank signed an agreement to pay $1.6 billion into the American budget and so forth. Okay, this one is very key. We also see the development of the process to create non-transparent economic blocks, which is done following practically all the rules of conspiracy. The goal is obvious: to reform the world economy in a way that would make it possible to extract greater profit from domination and the spread of economic, trade, and technological regulation standards. I think you know what he's talking about, the TPP and the TITP, yeah. The creation of economic blocks by imposing their terms on the strongest players would clearly not make the world safer, but would only create time bombs, conditions for future conflicts. The World Trade Organization was once set up. True, the discussion there is not proceeding smoothly, and the Doha round of talks ended in a deadlock, possibly But we should continue looking for ways out and for compromise, because only compromise can lead to the creation of a long-term system of relations of any sphere, including the economy. Meanwhile, if we dismiss that the concerns of certain countries, participants in economic communication, if we pretend that they can be bypassed, the contradictions will not go away. They will not be resolved. They will remain, which means one day they will make themselves known. As you know, our approach is different. While creating the Eurasian Economic Union, we tried to develop relations with our partners, including relations with the Chinese Silk Road Economic Belt Initiative. We are actively working on the basis of equality in the BRICS, in APEC, and the G20. Okay. Global information space is also shaken by war today, in a manner of speaking. The only correct viewpoint and interpretation of events is aggressively imposed on people. Certain facts are either concealed or manipulated. We all are used to labeling and creating of an enemy image. The authorities in countries that seem to have always appealed to such values as freedom of speech and free dissemination of information, something we have heard about so often in the past, are not trying to prevent the spreading of objective information and any opinion that differs from their own. They declare hostile propaganda that needs to be combated, clearly using undemocratic means. Unfortunately, we hear the words war and conflict ever more frequently when talking about relations between people of different cultures, religions, and ethnicity. Today, hundreds of thousands of migrants are trying to integrate into different society without a profession, without any knowledge of the language, traditions, and culture of the countries they are moving to. Meanwhile, residents of those countries, and we would openly speak about this without trying to polish things up, the residents are irritated by the dominance of strangers, rising crime rate, money spent on refugees from the budgets of their countries. Many people sympathize with the refugees, of course, and would like to help them. The question is, how do we do it without infringing on the interests of the residents of the countries where the refugees are moving? Meanwhile, a massive, uncontrolled, shocking clash of different lifestyles can lead, and already is leading, to growing nationalism and intolerance, to the emergence of a permanent conflict in society. Colleagues, we must be realistic. Military power, of course, and will remain for a long time still an instrument of international politics. Good or bad, this is a fact of life. The question is, will it be used only when all other means have been exhausted? When we have to resist common threats, like, for instance, terrorism? Or will it be used in compliance with the known rules laid down in international? Or will we use force or any pretext on any pretext, even just to remind the world who is boss here, without giving a thought about the legitimacy of the use of force and its consequences, without solving problems, but only multiplying them? Okay, we see what is happening in the Middle East. For decades, maybe even centuries, inter-ethnic, religious, and political conflicts and acute social issues have been accumulating here. In a word, a storm was brewing there, while attempts to forcefully rearrange the region became the match that led to the real blast, to the destruction of statehood, an outbreak of terrorism, and finally to growing global risks. A terrorist organization, the so-called Islamic State, took huge territories under control. Just think about it. If they occupied Damascus and Baghdad, the terrorist gangs would achieve the status of a practically official power. They would create a stronghold of global expansion. Is anyone considering this? It is time the entire international community realized what we are dealing with. It is, in fact, an enemy of civilization and world culture that is bringing with it an ideology of hatred and barbarity, trampling upon morals and world religious values, including those of Islam, thereby compromising it. We do not need wordplay here. We should not break down the terrorists into moderate or immoderate ones. It would be good to know the difference. Probably, in the opinion of certain experts, it is that the so-called moderate militants behead people in limited numbers or in some delicate fashion. In actual fact, We now see a real mix of terrorist groups. True, at times militants from the Islamic State, Jabhat al-Nusra, and other al-Qaeda heirs and splinters fight each other, but they fight for money, for feeding grounds. That is what they are fighting for. They're not fighting for ideological reasons. While their essence and methods remain the same, terror, murder, turning people into a timid, frightened, obedient mass. In the past years, the situation has been deteriorating. The terrorist infrastructure has been growing, along with their numbers, while the weapons provided to the so-called moderate opposition eventually end up in the hands of terrorist organizations. Moreover, sometimes entire bands would go over to their side, marching in with flying colors, as they say. Why is it that the efforts of, say, our American partners and their allies in the struggle against the Islamic State has not produced any tangible results? Obviously, this is not about any lack of military equipment or potential. Clearly, the United States has a huge potential, the biggest military potential in the world. Only double-crossing is never easy. You declare war on terrorists and simultaneously try to use some of them to arrange figures in the Middle East board in your own interest, as you may think. It is impossible to combat terrorism in general if some terrorists are used as a battering ram to overthrow the regimes that are not to one's liking. You cannot get rid of all those terrorists. It's only an illusion to think you can get rid of them later. Take power away from them and reach some agreement with them. The situation in Libya is the best example here. Let us hope that the new government will manage to stabilize the situation, though this is not a fact yet. However, we need to assist in this stabilization. We understand quite well that the militants fighting in the Middle East represent a threat to everybody, including Russia. People in our nation know what terrorist aggression means and know what the bandits of North Caucasus have done. We remember the bloody terrorist attacks in Budenovsk, Moscow, Beslan, Volgograd, and other Russian cities. Russia has always fought terrorism in all its forms, consistently advocating for truly unifying the global community efforts to fight this evil. That is why we have made our suggestion to create a broad anti-terror coalition, which I recently voiced in my speech to the United Nations. After Syria's official authorities reached out to us for support, we made the decision to launch a Russian military operation in that nation. I will stress again, it is fully legitimate and its only goal is to help restore peace. I'm sure that the Russian service members' actions will have the necessary positive effect on the situation, helping Syria's official authorities create the conditions for subsequent actions in reaching a political settlement and stage preemptive strikes against terrorists that threaten our nation, Russia. Thus, we will help all nations and peoples who are certainly in danger of these terrorists return home. Here's what we believe we must do to support long-term settlement in the region, as well as social, economic, and political revival. First of all, free Syria and Iraq territories from terrorists and not let them move their activities to other regions. And to do that, we must all join all forces, Iraqi and Syrian regular armies, Kurdish militia, various opposition that have actually made a real contribution to fighting terrorists, and coordinate the actions of countries within and outside the region against terrorists. At the same time, joint anti-terror act must certainly be based on international law. Second, it is obvious that a military victory over the militants alone will not resolve the problem, but it will create conditions for the main thing, a beginning of a political process with participation by all healthy patriotic forces of the Syrian society. It is the Syrians who must decide their fate with exclusive civil, respectful assistance from the international community, and not under external pressures through ultimatums, blackmail, or threats. The collapse of Syria's official authorities, for example, will only mobilize terrorists. Right now, instead of undermining them, we must revive them, strengthening of state institutions in this conflict zone. Okay. I want to remind you that throughout its history, the Middle East has often been an arena for clashes between various empires and powers. They redrew boundaries and reshaped the region's political structure to suit their tastes and interests. And the consequences were not always good or beneficial for the people living there. Actually, no one ever asked their opinion. The last people to find out what was happening in their own nations were the people living in the Middle East. Of course, this begs the question, isn't it time for the international community to coordinate all its actions with the people who live in these territories? It's long overdue. These people, like any people, should be treated with respect. The involvement in the process of political settlement of the Muslim clergy, leaders of Islam, and heads of Muslim nations is crucial. We count on their consolidated position and assistance, as well as their moral authority. It is very important to protect people, especially youth, against the destructive effects of the ideology of the terrorists who are trying to use them as cannon fodder, nothing more. We need to distinguish clearly between genuine Islam, whose values are peace, family, good deeds, helping others, respecting traditions, and the lies and hatred that the militants sow under the guise of Islam. Fourth, we currently need to develop a roadmap for the region's economic and social development to restore basic infrastructure, housing, hospitals, and schools. Okay. I'm reading Putin's entire speech at Valda. Okay, I'm almost done. Okay. Only this kind of on-site creative work after eliminating terrorism and reaching a political settlement can stop the enormous flow of refugees to European nations and return those who left to their homelands. It is clear that Syria will need massive financial, economic, and humanitarian assistance in order to heal the wounds of war. We need to determine the format within which we will do this work, getting donor nations and international financial institutions involved. Right now, serious problems are being discussed at the UN and other international organizations within the framework of interstate relations. It is true that for now, we are not always able to reach an understanding, and it is painfully difficult. To abandon might have been expectations and unjustified calculations, but nevertheless, there is some progress. We see that contacts are being gradually established between military departments within the anti-terrorist operation framework, although not as actively and quickly as we might like. Approval of the Russian-American document on safety guidelines for the two countries' military flying missions over Syria is a serious step in that direction. We are also close to starting an exchange of information with our Western colleagues or militant positions and movements. All these are certainly steps in the right direction. What's most critical is to treat one another's allies as in a common fight, to be honest and open. Only then can we guarantee the victory over terrorists. For all the drama of its current situation, Syria can become a model for partnership in the name of common interests, resolving problems that affect everyone, and developing an effective risk management system. We already had this opportunity after the Cold War. Unfortunately, we did not take advantage of it. We also had the opportunity in the early 2000s when Russia and US and many other nations were faced with terrorist aggression, and unfortunately, we were unable to establish a good dynamic for cooperating then either. I will not return to that and the reasons for why we were unable to do this. I think everybody knows already. Now, what's important is to draw the right lessons from what happened in the past and to move forward. I am confident that the experience we acquired in today's situation will allow us to finally make the right choice, a choice in favor of cooperation, mutual respect, and trust, the choice in favor of peace. Thank you very much for your attention. Now, so that I read you the whole speech, and I really don't ever do that, but I felt that that speech, and my organization isn't backing me up on this because they're probably still discussing the speech, but in my view, that speech and what it represents and what Putin said there puts an end to what we call the New World Order, puts an end to what Bush said called the New World Order, put the end to what Tony Blair in 1999 called an end of the Westphalian system. It essentially puts an end to all of that and puts it squarely on the table. Right? There's no wiggle room. This speech does not allow any wiggle room for the United States and the British and the Empire. They have no wiggle room in this speech. You either do what Putin is proposing, and the implication is if you don't, it's going to be nuclear war or worse. And it's very straightforward. And it's not It's not an issue of empire. It's not an issue of, it's an issue of what's right for human beings, what's right for human society, what's right for the people in the neighborhood, what's right for everybody. And then this is backed by the military might of Russia. But it's not a military thing at all. He's saying it's not a military thing. It's a question of stating the obvious. That the time for empires, the time for all of this stuff is finished. We now have to work together as a human species, essentially. Now, coming from Helga Zepp-LaRouche, well, that doesn't have the weight. Coming from Putin, it has real weight. Okay, and this development, starting in the military sense, September 30th, and continuing on to now, a little more than 3 weeks later, you see this transformation now beginning to take place. If Europe wants to survive, they have to work for this goal. They will not survive. Their countries will be torn apart by the effects of all of this in that part of the world. If the United States wants to survive, they have to work with this. The American people are starting to find out that why are the Russians having success in the battle and we have not had any success in 15 years. So, well, 14 and a half years. And that gets at the root of the whole issue. And he's implying it in his speech. He's implying this in his speech. He doesn't say it outright, but it's implied in his speech. That since 9/11, you've had the war on terrorism, starting with Bush and Cheney, continuing on with Obama. But what the effect of the war on terrorism is the massive increase of terrorism. Was that their intention to cause the massive increase of terrorism? Yes. Putin didn't say that, but it was implied. When they went into Iraq, Cheney decided not to use the Iraqi army after they took over Iraq, not to use the Iraqi army to maintain stability. So you had chaos. That was intentional. They overthrew Gaddafi. Did they create something to replace Gaddafi? No. It was intentional. Because under those circumstances, this kind of thing could flourish. Was it intentional? Yes. But the American people are now beginning to discover, because of Russia's success, that the whole 9/11 business was a fraud. So now, what is Obama going to do, or what would Cameron do? Well, we got to mobilize to stop terrorism. Well, Russia's doing it. Why not you? So they don't have that edge. I mean, how does this whole thing work? You have the NSA, you have the spy, all the revelations, right? Everything that came in with the Patriot Act and the equivalent in Canada and Great Britain and everything has come in, is now being called into question. Not just like it was in, there were no weapons of mass destruction. How could you not know that? How can you say that there were weapons of mass destruction and not know that there wasn't weapons of mass destruction? No, but this whole thing is being called into question. The entire world control. This is how you control the world. This is how they control the world from 2001, January, September 2001, so it's 14 years. September 2001 till now, this is how the world has been run. Right now, Ash Carter is going to all these countries in Europe and in the Middle East. Ash Carter is the defense secretary. And he's telling these people, don't work with Russia. You got to do this. You got to do that. And what happens if you don't do that? Well, things are going to happen to you. things are going to happen to you. Things are going to happen to your leadership. Things are going to happen here. You have to understand that every part of the world that's not part of the core, every part of the world, including the populations in the United States and Canada and Great Britain, as well as in Europe, they've been living under a regime of terror under the surface. You don't know what's going to happen. Oh, you're a politician? Well, the NSA knows you had a mistress, right? You know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So people have been very fearful, paranoid. We don't know what's going to happen. Oh, they monitor all the internet. They monitor our phone calls, everything, the whole mindset. And then you have the people coming out saying, you know, like back in the time of 9/11, you know, who are you working with the terrorists? You know, it was like in the U.S. That was really bad. I mean, when I went out with it, I went out right after 9/11 with a sign that said, "If you believe Osama did it, then welcome to Disneyland." And I had every day I had 2 or 3 police come by saying, "Well, I got a tip that you guys were terrorists from the population." You know, but I'm saying this mindset, it also has a numbing effect on people. They feel that it's hopeless. There's nothing you can do. You can't stand up to the power that be that runs this whole structure. But now you did have somebody stand up to the power at B, the powers that be. A smaller power, but a significant power. And they just stood up. And that was what happened. And the whole edifice of the control over people has cracked. The whole edifice has cracked in this situation. And then, so this is now a time of opportunity for us to go on the offensive for the policies that have to be adopted in the context of the financial crisis. But you couldn't really deal with that if you had this climate of terror. I mean that's how they got the bailout. You know, they used terror. Now, now I want to quickly go through this question of the New World Order, right? The old world order sucked. It had 3 polarities. The communist, common bloc, so-called, and the so-called democratic nations, the so-called bloc, and then the non-aligned bloc. And China was somewhere in between the non-aligned and the Russian and the Soviet bloc. And these were the whole system was a balancing act between these two, and they would carry out surrogate operations in developing countries and so on and so forth. But it also gave the developing countries a certain influence that they could threaten to go to the U.S. if they didn't get what they wanted from the Soviets, or they could threaten to go to the Soviets if they didn't get what they wanted from the U.S. So there was a little bit of maneuvering room there. However, the whole game was set up by the British after the death of FDR. So when that system collapsed and you had an opportunity to have a real world without that conflict, without that tension, without that controlling communism versus anti-communism, capitalism versus anti-capitalism, what did you have? You had the looting of Russia. What else did you have? You have the Balkan Wars. What were the Balkan Wars about? It was about breaking up the possibility of the development of Eastern Europe, the possibility of having Western Europe, which had certain industrial capabilities, collaborating and developing Eastern Europe, which included Russia. And what else happened? You had Desert Storm. And what was all of this all about? It's about establishing the hegemony of the so-called victors of the Cold War. It wasn't about development, and there wasn't any development. Instead, there was looting. Everybody got looted, especially Eastern Europe, especially Russia. And that left Russia in an incredibly prostate condition by the time they were in an existential crisis around the year 1999, 1998, 1999, and and they were in an existential crisis, and they had to deal with it. And that's when Putin came in and started to deal with it. And Putin didn't have any power to challenge the order. So he played with it as best he could, placated it, played with it, did whatever he could to hold on until he developed. The same thing with China. They had to go along, but only so far. But now it's time, because of the financial crisis, because this system has now created instruments of rule involving chaos and terrorism to threaten every nation to not do what their own interests. So this is essentially where we are. And so what Putin has done is he has punctured that whole thing. The whole thing is punctured. And now you're seeing the potential for sweeping changes on a planetary scale. Now, what else is happening? Well, the Chinese are working in tandem with Russia, right? They're coming in with proposals for development. They're coming in with money for development. They're coming in to Great Britain. We're going to help rebuild Great Britain. Right? What's wrong with that? But what's the price? Well, the price is you don't want to have a nuclear war. You don't want to have the world go to hell. You want to give people an option. That's the whole idea. You want to give humanity an option. You want to bring economic development, which is an option. You want to bring economic development to Afghanistan. You want to bring economic development to Africa. You want to bring economic development to all of the world, including the parts of the world that used to be developed and are now no longer as developed as they used to be. So this is what we're doing. And he called the TPP and the TITP as conspiratorial, criminal, in effect, looting operations, which they are. That's what he called them. And he compared that to the BRICS as being transparent. That's very significant. That's very, very significant. You know, so that's very serious. So this is all implied in his speech. And who was there? Who was there on the podium? Václav Klaus, the former president of Czechoslovakia. Laranjani, the current Speaker of the Iranian Parliament. Jack Matloff, the former ambassador to the Soviet Union, who called Obama's foreign policy autistic. Who's called Obama's policy to the Russians autistic. And then you have you had also one other person there that was significant. I forgot. Anyhow, but in the audience you had people like former prime ministers of France, former prime ministers of Austria, and others of that quality there. And they're being quoted on RT and stuff like that. So how is the United States and the empire reacting to all of this? Okay. Well, there isn't a unified reaction. That's very important. There is not a unified reaction. Do you see the Canadian U.S. press all of a sudden going wild with Putin as the Antichrist, and we got to crush Putin relative to before? No. What's happened? What has happened? Something has happened. Do you see rabid right-wing Republicans gnawing to bite into Putin? No. Half of them are saying, well, let's help Putin kill those terrorists. So what's going on? What's happening? What's happening? Well, something very profound is going on, is what I'm saying. On a deep level inside the United States, inside Canada, inside Great Britain, and also inside Europe. But it's Great Britain, Canada, and the US which are the core, the more inner core of this empire. Okay? So something's happening. It's not working. And the jingoistic, provocative labeling without any, just is not working like it was. Okay, and you'll hear more about that related to the Canadian election. Okay, so Putin has challenged this empire, and the empire has no resolution to launch an immediate counterattack. And this empire is also on the edge of a financial meltdown, a financial collapse, in which each government, Canada, the United States, Great Britain, each government in that financial, if they want their people to survive, if they even want their government to survive, they're going to have to take their banks, reorganize them, wipe out the bad paper, and they can only do it through the government. They're going to have to do that. And that's the next step coming. But had that financial collapse occurred in this terrorist situation, in this constant war situation, in that framework, without an alternative in place, without the Chinese going around the world telling people, we'll help you, let's both benefit, without the BRICS being in place, the only option would be nuclear war and for the empire. So what you have now is a situation where they are now temporarily paralyzed. And they have Obama in the White House, and he's very dangerous. And so now in the US, you have people like Henry Kissinger, of all people, saying we should work with Russia. Why is Henry Kissinger saying we should work with Russia? Because the vast majority of the policy people in the United States agree the United States should work with Russia. You don't hear them on CNN, you don't hear them on the news, but the vast majority of senior policy people agree we should work with Russia. The U.S. should work with Russia. And who are the people in the Obama administration who say we shouldn't? Victoria Nuland, Susan Rice, Valerie Jarrett, Michelle Obama, Samantha Powers, and whoever male figures around there that's been castrated by them. I mean, and who are they? Have they ever served time in the military? Were they ever in the intelligence community other than John Brennan, who's a very strange character? very bizarre. He was recruited by the Saudis a long time ago, and you know he's running the drones. He was running the drone stuff. So you have this split. You have this profound split inside the institutions. They are not with Obama on this confrontation with Russia. They're not with Obama on putting ISIS. When when the Democrats lost control in the last election in 2014, they lost control of the Senate and the House, the Senate, and they became less. They had less, and they did very poorly in the midterm elections. Everybody on the inside was telling us, this is the time to clean out Obama's advisors and bring in some competent people so we can deal with this stuff. And sure enough, the Obama administration leaked a memo that was sent from the Defense Secretary, Chuck Hagel, to none other than Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor, saying, hey, we got a problem here. We have a very conflicted policy in Syria and these places. You know, we need to have a clear idea of what we want to do here. They leaked it. The Obama administration leaked it. And within a week or two, he was forced to resign. There was no change. Rather, he was replaced by someone who was not part of the institutions, Ash Carter. So that didn't work. So now you have a situation where Obama is, and his immediate British handlers, and they are British operatives, and I discovered that 2 weeks ago, Thursday. I discovered exactly how this thing works. The British Embassy coordinates directly, you know, these women and their units, you know, their whatever, and they coordinate them. Obama doesn't go to his advisors. He doesn't go to John Kerry to ask for advice. He doesn't go to the former military head to ask for advice. He gets his narrative from the British Embassy. I discovered that because the first secretary of the British Embassy was in Seattle, and he was trying to explain what the new narrative was since Putin went into. The British changed their narrative because of what Putin did, and his narrative was, and he did a presentation. I told you this before. He did a presentation on to the think tank, to the University of Washington Foreign School, the Jackson School. He did this narrative. He said, wow. He said, Putin did not act in the manner that we had expected. Therefore, we have a problem. Europe, and he was speaking for Europe and the EU, for the EU and Great Britain. And therefore, we have to change our tactics. So he's trying to get the Americans to understand that we now have to modulate a little bit. And that's what I do. That's what I do. Okay, I got it now. This is where it's coming from. So what did Obama say about Russia's actions in Syria? What did he say? Oh, Russia's desperate. They have no one in the world, and they're just trying to shore up this, you know, whatever. And they're just desperate. That's all. That's the narrative. It's total bull. It's total lie. It's just a narrative. So the Obama administration is being run on a narrative. Their public presentations, a pure narrative. It's nothing real.
The British run everything on a narrative.
Yeah, they run everything on a narrative. So after he gave his presentation, I'll just tell you, I asked him, okay, I got a 3-part question to ask you. First of all, the Ukrainian situation is not about what happened in Ukraine. It's not just about Russia. You have the Eurasian. He mentioned the Eurasian Union. He said it's about. I said Xi Jinping came to Moscow and said this new Silk Road is going to be integrated with the Eurasian Union. So it's not just about that. It's not just about Russia becoming a new empire or something like that. And then you have the BRICS. And then I said Henry Kissinger has said that Ukraine should be neutral, and if the West wants to change that, Putin has the upper hand. And then I said Israel and Turkey are now discussing working with Russia because they showed some strength in Syria. And this was the first secretary of the British Embassy and the one responsible for security matters in Africa and the Middle East, in Eastern Europe, and the U.S. Embassy. So what he said is what he said. He said, no. China is just taking advantage of Russia's situation, right? That's how he put it, right? No BRICS, no nothing. He didn't mention none of that. And he said, who am I to challenge? Who am I to challenge the great Henry Kissinger? But then who is Henry Kissinger to challenge the will of 57 million Ukrainians? I went, oh my God. And then he said, and he did the thing about Putin being desperate. And I knew immediately that the narrative, Obama's narrative was coming from the British, completely from the British. Every narrative is from the British. So what you have is the British and their operatives now are exposed. And you have the institutions who are having to deal with the fact that we're about to have a financial collapse and they're going to have to do something. And they got this person, this very sick individual in the White House. Now, so then after that happened, all our eyes were on the Democratic Party debate. We saw the Republican Party debate, and we weren't sure if there was anybody there
Nobody home.
who had any concept of reality at all, And then, so I said, well, at least there's some candidates pushing for Glass-Steagall, for the bank issue, for the bank thing. So then I turn on the debate. I watched the whole debate in horror, I might add. And so you have these commentators, right? And they're all political operatives. And then you have Anderson Cooper. And before the debate, they're talking about the blah, 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 blah. And then I look at the audience. It's not a typical audience debate. It's like one of those game show audiences, but very big, very large with lights and balloons and everything else like that. What the hell is that? And it's like everybody's revved up and everybody's revved up. It's not a debate. There's something else, like a rally or something. And then the debate opens not with the moderator saying, okay, now here are the lines, the rules, what have you. It opens with, guess what? The head of the Democratic National Committee, which is sponsoring the debate, announcing that people are going to have the pleasure of watching a clip of the president. And so the president makes this thing about the debate. Now, 2 days before the debate, 3 days, Bernie Sanders, who's been very critical of Obama, had come out effusively supporting Obama, what Obama's done, what a great friend he is, and all of this stuff. It was really bad. It wasn't your typical, we have to be perfunctory. It went way beyond that. And then we found out that some of Obama's fundraising methods were being now used by him with people from the Obama operation. So Bernie Sanders. So then you have this debate. And the whole thing is set up with the audience response, with the moderator, so that Hillary so they try to make Hillary look good, and they try to make Obama appear to be you know, no one's challenging Obama. No one's challenging Obama. Now at the same time this is happening, a little while earlier, the majority caucus in the U.S. Congress collapsed. Why did it collapse? I know why it collapsed. And I'll tell you that, really, and then I'll come back to the debate. In 2014, during the campaign leading into 2014, and I was on the streets, and I know this for a fact, the Republican National Committee, the Tea Party people, all these people, they were saying, okay, we get the majority, and then we're going to open up Benghazi, we're going to open up everything, we're going to get at what is behind it all, and we're going to impeach that person. Okay, and that was the main fundraising, the main drive. That's how they got people out to vote, because you have the moderate and conservative elements, the blue collar crowd, the people who hate Obama, who hate the terrorism, the military. All these people came out and they voted for the Republicans. They wrote money. So okay, the Republicans are going to save us. They're going to, once they get into Congress, they can get Obama out. I'm saying that's what really happened. So the Republicans come in. And on October, John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, said, it's all off the table. Business as usual. And at that point, the ferment in the population, which was very real, died. It just died. Everyone just said, that's it. I've had it with the Republican Party. That's it. They're gone. The vocal, active part of the Republican Party, in the population. And those people, and then they turn around and it's Obama and the Republicans who ran through the TPP fast track. And people are going, wait a second. The Democrats don't like Obama. And it's the Republicans that are protecting him. What's going on here? And so Boehner, who applied all his force to keep the Republicans in line in a very unpopular to the base policy, reached the point of exhaustion and quit. And they have not yet come up with a successor. And Paul Ryan is saying, I'm not going to be in charge if this is going to be like this. You all have to unite. And they're not going to unite. You got all these crazy people, plus you have people that have had it with the military policy. They've had it with Obama's policy. And so that's what happened to the Republicans. Now, what's happening to the Democrats? Not one of these candidates criticized Obama. None of them. So what's happening to the Democratic base? Do they like Hillary Clinton? The so-called winner of the debate? I mean, there was, if I ever had any sympathy for her, I lost it in that debate. I saw a total the crassness of her, the crassness. And what did you get? Jim Webb dropped out, calling the whole thing a farce. And the other minor candidate,
Chafee.
Lincoln Chafee dropped out, saying, the only reason I was running was to stop a war. And he dropped out. And the whole thing was a self-discredited farce. So now you have all the media hype about Hillary Clinton won the debate, all this stuff, and she's now in the Benghazi hearings, and which she totally committed herself to Obama in the hearings. All right? And the population, do they like that? Are they cheering Hillary Clinton? No. Are they cheering? Who are they cheering? Well, they're probably cheering the reality TV show guy, you know, and But that's not real. Any time that people want, they can have his closet or his graveyard come out. I mean, he was involved. He's been involved with the mob. He has close mob contacts. I mean, this guy is like open mob associated businessman. You know. So in that context, you have to understand that the presidential process was controlled by the British, in effect, through the media and through the Obama administration, which applied pressure onto the debates. And one of the key people who has surfaced attacking all of this is a congresswoman from Hawaii. Her name is Tulsi Gabbard. She's also a major, or lieutenant colonel, or major in the
National Guard.
In the National Guard. She was in Iraq, and she's in intelligence, and she's just ripping apart the whole thing and saying that the United States has to work with Russia. And she was on Wolf Blitzer earlier. So I'm saying this to set the stage that you're coming into the financial crisis. The presidential process is not presenting any possible future alternative. Yes, Glass-Steagall did come out in the debate, but that's not the point. The point is that you don't see any viable potential leader emerging from which the population can rally around, or which the institutions can rally around. So there is nobody that the institutions can rally around. So guess what? You can't have Obama in the White House when the system goes. You have to get him out. Or if you can't get him out, you have to get him. You have to get his British operatives removed and put him under supervision. Now, normally that's what they do. You know, when Cheney lost power in the Bush administration, they put in a new team. That new team included Robert Gates as the Secretary of Defense. But will Obama dump his team? No, he will never dump his team. They just tried to do that a little over a year ago. They're not gonna dump his team. He's not gonna dump his team because he depends psychologically on his very psychological existence. Because he's an extremely unstable psychological person. They have to work. They have to pump him up. And he's on the edge of having a blowout. If he will have a blowout if he removes his team. So what are you going to do? You got to do something. So then, after the debates, guess what? The drone report. How many people have looked at the drone report? This is amazing. This thing is amazing, what they did with the drones. I mean, it's totally amazing. And Obama's excited, you know, the whole thing is quite something. And then, what else did you get? What else happened? You had the whole revival of Seymour Hersh's article on the fraud of the story about the assassination of Osama bin Laden. And what else did you have? You have the hospital in Kunduz. That was deliberate. That had to come from the top. And it was done.
Doctors Without Borders.
Yeah, Doctors Without Borders, and it had to come from the top.
They came out against the TPP and pharmaceutical control of global.
That's one of
global
them.
drugs.
But this was the main hospital. They treat an enormous number of people in this hospital. 95 beds, a high-level hospital. They destroyed it.
The attack went on for an hour and a half. Paul.
Yeah. They destroyed this hospital.
They were attacking
You can't make a mistake like that.
Yeah. It's not a mistake.
After people are calling in saying you're attacking this hospital, please stop. They didn't stop until the hospital was completely destroyed. But what was the intention of destroying this hospital? Very simple. We just destroyed a hospital. We have power. We can destroy a hospital, wipe it out, and say that maybe the Taliban was there, We can say, we made a mistake. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? We can destroy a hospital. What are you going to do about it? And then people try to do something about it, and they don't get anywhere. And guess what? They lose faith. They lose a sense of justice. They lose a sense of something like that. But that's not happening. The Doctors Without Borders and allied forces are going to take it all the way to war crimes, you name it. This is how this terror works. You kill these civilians. Are they really trying to kill the few people that they have that are? No. What's the role? It frightens people. It terrorizes people. Besides, they're not trying to. They're not opposed to having more terrorists because that's the whole thing. So the whole thing is terror. It's fear. You have this unmanned thing. You have no control over it. It has nobody in it, and it has no. It's not. It makes its decisions are being made from far away, and the people far away don't even know. Aren't close enough to even experience the effects. It's incredible. It's incredibly evil, and there's no military objective for it. You can't win a war with any war with drones. You're not going to win a war. It's only designed to terrorize the population. So this is what's coming out, and this is serious because it's being done in the name of the American people, and this is serious. And these revelations are going to have an effect. But I don't think it's enough to get the American people to rise up. What I think is going on is the preparations are now being made to take Obama out under forced resignation or the use of the 25th Amendment. And the circumstance that will lead to Obama's removal is the financial crisis and some kind of understanding among the institutions that certain things have to be done, and they have to be done under a team that would be put in under his successor. Now, they could put that team in while Obama's in office, but that team could never come in under the British because the British would block it. Or at least the crowd, the British crowd that is in charge of these people would block it. So that's where we are. So we're in that situation. So now, so within that context, I'm going to open it up for a few questions on this part, and then we're going to have Robbie's going to go through something on the Canadian election as it relates to what I just described. Go ahead.
You've not said much about Hillary Clinton and Benghazi. She's being tried, right? I mean,
no, she's under oath in front of a congressional hearings, and she lied about Obama. She knew what was going on. They didn't press her all the way, and she took a decision to protect Obama all the way and not let anything come out. And I didn't watch the hearings. I wouldn't watch the hearings. I wouldn't want to watch the hearings. So yeah. So I don't know where it's going, but
because they know they could press.
Yeah, but they have to do it. And go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I watched the hearings. They were pressing her on the criminality of the fact that she left the ambassador and the staff at risk, knowing they were informed 2 weeks before, a week that they were under attack at times, that there was threats of taking out the ambassador and the place, and he asked for help on 4 occasions. On 4 occasions, he was denied from the State Department and directly from Hillary. Hillary was trying to say that she didn't have information about that nor knew. And then they were revealing the evidence that she did know on this date, on this date, on this date, on this date. So there's a whole criminality involved with what's going on here in terms of the responsibility to the staff and the ambassador that was murdered or killed. But clearly the evidence is there, and that's what they're pushing on hard, is that she knew and did nothing. And she did nothing because they didn't want to say things were going bad in Benghazi and Libya, because the politics were such they had to show that they were succeeding in Libya.
Yeah, but see, that's not the real story, but yeah.
No, but that's what they're attacking.
Yeah, see, it's surface.
Yeah.
It's not the deeper
But-
thing. They didn't go for the gusto.
No, they're not attaching Obama. They're not.
No, that's the whole
They're
point.
not doing all the things they need to do.
No, because you have to go for Obama. If you want to wipe out Hillary, you go for Obama.
But she's attaching herself to Obama. She's
Yes.
defending him all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's your
Go
turn.
I don't like, what's the word? Concentrating the whole issue on Obama. George Bush did exactly the same thing. And in the second term, the Democrats went in on the assumption that they are going to impeach him.
Okay, there you go.
And then,
Nancy Pelosi said impeachment is off the table,
the
right?
very first thing Nancy Pelosi said, impeachment is off the table.
Right.
Something the Republicans did, as you described.
Yeah.
So these are games. These two people are playing with this. This is one party with two different names.
Yes, and the point is they have lost. They have lost.
They both lost because it's ridiculous. The whole situation.
The whole
is
thing,
ridiculous.
and when Putin went into Syria, it finished the job.
That's right.
It finished
So
the job.
My point is that the problem is not Obama. Obama is a symptom, is not the cause of the disease.
No, but the removal of Obama.
It doesn't matter because George Bush was removed, okay, and Obama continued exactly the same policy. for
Right,
2 terms.
but I'm saying
So the
to
problem is not
you
Obama.
that things have progressed or regressed or degressed or whatever to the point that no, I understand what you're saying, but to the point that it's now an existential issue of the immediate survival of the nation to have a team in place to do what's required and to work with the Russians.
But the point is that who is going to supervise Obama? Now, this is the whole political system in the United States is corrupt to the core. Democrats and Republicans and whoever is around.
But there is outside the political system a grouping of people who have responsibility.
But these people has to go into the elections and gain control over the political process.
Well, that was the idea, but that's not going to work. So they're going to have to run a coup.
Then there is something.
A coup. Did you just say coup? I just can't believe I heard that.
This is the whole problem involved. That is really, it's a catch-22 here.
Yeah, I know, but here I got to say something to you. I'm not speaking as an observer here. LaRouche is not speaking as an observer. We're not speaking as observers. I have to make that very clear. We're speaking as participants in the process. That's the difference. We're conspirators, okay? We're conspiring to do the right thing. And Putin has helped us immensely in giving us the increased capacity to do that. Okay.
Are you joking or are you
No,
talking?
I'm serious. I'm very serious.
Okay.
No, it is a conspiracy.
Yeah.
It's a conspiracy, yes.
It's for real.
It's for real. Okay. Okay. Cool. Okay. No, I'm putting my finger to the. Be cool now, okay? All right, go ahead, and we'll do a couple more, and then I want Robbie to come up. Go ahead.
Could you elaborate more
I recommend everybody go to the drone, type in drone report, and
The
you'll get intercept, and you'll get. I just did it. You'll get the full story. I don't want to go into details.
They're flying in 7 countries and executions are taking place every day. They kill 10 innocent people for on average, every one person they think they got.
1 out of 10.
Yeah. That's been going on.
9 innocents and 1 so-called non-innocent.
Yeah, it's quite the program.
And they're calling them they're calling them all enemy combatants.
Whether they're women or kids, it's like.
Yeah, the drone report, just put that into Google, and then you'll get the full thing from Intercept.
This is the U.S. doing this?
This was a Snowden type leaker inside the system, whose name is we don't know, but it went through Brent Greenwald.
I just want to know about this about Russia. Is it Putin is like a rebirth of Soviet Union?
No.
Or this is like what do you call the Romanov
No.
family back from the
No.
18th century, or what happened changing there that Russia just kind of stand up from what they have been. I mean, they were really crushed after Soviet.
All right. Putin is a person who initially was put in a position where he had to behave in a manner to try to save Russia from being destroyed. And so in the course of having to confront the problems of saving Russia, he developed certain capabilities as a leader through the crucible of the problems that he had. And he had a lot of problems. He still has a lot of problems in Russia, But he's a person who is trying to grapple with the problems confronting Russia, but he cannot grapple ultimately with the problems confronting Russia without grappling with the problem of the external enemy of Russia. Besides all the internal problems, the external enemy of Russia, he has to deal with that. And so does China, and so does India, and so does every country. So what has emerged is an open understanding. I won't use the word conspiracy. An open understanding among these nations based upon a lot of things, but also based upon something that happened in 1998, which was the first proposal of this type to deal with this. In 1998, Russia went into a crisis, a financial crisis, and for a brief time, a new prime minister came in by the name of Primakov. And Primakov and his people were in contact with Lyndon LaRouche. And when Lyndon LaRouche went there, he met with these people. And he put forward a plan for them to adopt. And what LaRouche tried to do in that period was to eventually get Primakov in the same room with Clinton. So Primakov could collaborate with Clinton, and Clinton could collaborate with Primakov. 3 times that was prevented by Al Gore and General Al Gore prevented it from happening, and others prevented it. It's a whole story. So the proposal that LaRouche had was that the United States, Russia, China, and India should cooperate and bring in a new Bretton Woods system to replace the existing system, which was finished. And Clinton was open to the idea. And Clinton was not only open to the idea, but LaRouche was organizing the discussion to bring these people in, to bring these forces in. Now, that didn't happen. Monica Lewinsky and all of that was a factor. All these things happened to prevent the President of the United States, who wasn't very strong anyhow, but still he was inclined in this direction, from beginning to have a collaborative relationship with Russia and then bring China and India in. So Primakov, in that situation, made a proposal for China, Russia, and India to work together. And that was the beginning of the creation of what became known as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which was the first move in this direction. Then the British decided to co-opt this whole thing and proposed the BRICS. And they proposed a BRICS that would create a basket of currencies of the 5 countries that would be used. And so they began to play the BRICS off against the euro, off against the US. So they were looking at it that way. But it turns out that that's not the way it emerged. That's not the way it emerged. So they were trying to co-opt this in that way. So no, Putin is operating from the perspective presented to him by presented earlier by Primakov, who recently passed away. And that proposal by Primakov was influenced by LaRouche, significant. The network around Primakov. There was a lot of cross discussion on policy. So this is where it originates from. So, but Putin did not initially have that outlook necessarily, but he was being opposed by a lot of people who later became collaborators of his. Rogozin was an opponent of his. Glaziev was an opponent of his, because Putin the paradox is that the people who were destroying Russia are the ones who brought Putin to power. And that was the paradox. And he has maintained a certain balance between between what we call the Eurasian sovereigntists, the people that we work with, versus the Atlantic integrationists. He kept the balance between the two because he wasn't prepared to stand up until now. You don't want to stand up if you don't have the capacity to stand up.
We have your ducks in a row.
You got to have it all set up.
Yeah.
So he has not. So he's now stood up, but But on the other hand, he's trying to recruit these people too. See, it's because the enemy is not. It's not Obama. Obama's not the enemy. The enemy is this crowd around the monarchy. They're the ones that you got to deal with, and they're the ones directing these very destructive policies with the help of the Saudis and others. And so, they have the weapon. The big weapon they have is the financial system. It's to threaten to collapse the financial system without there being any, just to collapse it and have total chaos. That's the big threat. That's the big club they have, besides nuclear war. That's the big club they have. And so now we're entering that kind of period. Now, on that note, I think the Canadian elections have some connection to all of this. And I think Robbie will now go through that with you.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul, per usual. Enlightening and also inspiring, in a sense that it always makes me consider things that I didn't consider before. And one of those things is, in light of this election, although I do want to talk specifically about what the Liberal majority government means to Canadians, within that context, I have also been inspired by two things. One is this paper, and I wrote this here. It's a YouTube video Robert Ingram giving a presentation on the paper he wrote. And what this paper addresses is the struggle within the United States. For a long time, our message was misinterpreted, which was the U.S. Republic was resistance to empire. And we wanted to revive that and inspire the American people. But memory is short. And that resistance stopped with starts and spurts in between of great heroes like FDR and JFK. And we all know what happened to them. So this paper makes it more clear, because it is really muddled, because we tend, as human beings, to think in a left-right paradigm. We tend to conceive things as, you know, this guy did 9 good things, but, you know, he did 1 bad thing, and so he's out. You know, we tend to think in a very, like, strict judgments, and especially about history, and especially about people. So, welcome. Especially about people in power. And while I've never had a particularly powerful position, I have been a manager of up to 75 or 80 people at a very young age. So, you know, I cannot conceive of the amount of responsibility and incredible challenge that it would be to be a leader of a country or a party or whatever that is. I can tell you how hard it is to manage 75 people, all of different ethnic origins, of different age groups, and with different challenges. It's bloody hard, and you don't please everybody. Not one day goes by where you don't have a complaint about something. So I can't imagine how challenging it would be to do what political leaders do. Anyways, so that's one aspect of this. The other aspect, and I hope you can watch it, I think it's 2.5 hours long, so if you don't have time, but the other thing that I was inspired by was the introduction by Mike Steger.
It's awesome. Yep.
Mike Steger is the leader of our movement in San Francisco. What he goes through is probably the best, most, you know, inspiring, positive synopsis of the history of the LaRouche movement, but in the context of history. The context, and this is, you know, if you get the promo, you understand what I'm saying. Locate yourself in history. This movement is a part of history. There have been other movements as well that have also been a part of history. There are lots of different groups that are resisting empire, some successfully, some not. But if you watch that, you get a sense of the power of ideas. And so, in a sense, I'm going to be addressing the naysayers and the doubters, and those that would rather, I mean, we need to be critical. We need to be very critical, and we need to be rigorous. But what I hope that I convey to you tonight is a sense of optimism, not because we now have some great leader and voting day is over and we all walk away. My sense of optimism is coming from someone, amongst others, who are active. As Paul said, we are participants in this process. It's not armchair analysis, which can be very, very good. But when you become an active participant in the political process itself and a part of the resistance, things change. Your perspective changes. So that's one of the things. The other, so the two things I was most, you know, kind of inspired by when I put this together was that, and also, like I said, and maybe it's some, you know, extended sympathy for having managed people before, or for, you know, from having taken a leadership role, is the sense that you can't do everything right. You certainly don't. You won't do everything right as a leader, as a, you know. But who you have around you and the kinds of policies that you're affected by can push those leaders in the right direction. And that is our job as participants in the political process. So with that in mind, you know, politicians could be agents of oligarchy, you know, but they may be agents of resistance. How do you know? Agents of resistance have to operate in a more covert fashion when a country is being ruled by an oligarch or a dictator. That's why, as a political activist, it is so very important to know your history. Not just to study it and memorize facts and whatnot, but you have to know your history. And when you do, you study history and understand it from the lens, from the proper lens. Sorry, when you understand history, when you're studying it, and you're taking it from the proper lens, what you're really discovering is ideas. You're discovering how ideas evolve, how they spread, and how they transform society as a whole. And on the movement. I'm not saying it isn't in other movements or elsewhere throughout history. It absolutely is, because one of the great frauds of this century is that there hasn't been resistance. There has been major resistance. And so we come to, you know, great surprise when we find out that a movement like this still exists and has resisted, or is participating in that resistance within the system. Or, and here's another great inspiration. I've been inspired continually since last July when the BRICS made their move on the international stage. But one of the other ones is Jeremy Corbyn. There's resistance, and that is a colony of the British Empire, which we all, as Canadian citizens, really need to be paying attention to and appreciating for what it is. Not because it's happening in the UK, but because of what effect that may have on our leadership here and on our activism here. Who is Jeremy Corbyn? Is pro-BRICS, by the way. He is pro-Glass-Steagall. He also denied the Queen the privilege of making him one of the Privy Council. He rejected that.
And was stripped.
Oh, right, and since then, I don't know if you know this, he's been stripped of his Right Honourable status. So, nonetheless, Xi Jinping still visited with him when Xi Jinping went to the UK.
Is he going to be alive?
Well, this is the question. Now, this goes back to the BRICS process. Okay, I think I said this in one of my last presentations, is that Argentina would not have had the courage to stand up to Wall Street the way they did had the BRICS process not been underway the way it was. Now, this is not to defend Gaddafi or any other individual, you know, for what they did. But when Gaddafi got up in front of the UN and he ripped up the UN Charter and called them all a bunch of hypocrites for not living up to their own UN Charter, he was a lone wolf. This is no longer the case in the BRICS system, because it's a system now, and it's been consolidated. It's not just an individual being, you know, the big bodyguard of anyone. It is a system that is moving in a direction. So in that context, we have to understand where Jeremy Corbyn is coming from. And yeah, I mean, I hope that he's, you know, actually one of his close collaborators. Was it a collaborator? Yeah. Meacher, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Was died suddenly. We don't know what of, and it was very suspicious. But in any case, Jeremy Corbyn is still here. So, you know, we have to weigh these things, and that I'm going to be getting to more of that. So when I'm just going to go back to the history part. So when you get, you know, when you're studying history and you get the resistance, you get what these resistant layers have done and what the empire has done against them. the empire itself and their character become self-evident. You discover what this resistance looks like. The LaRouche movement, through years of research, rigorous looking at material over 40 plus years, has figured out that it was the city building societies that empire wanted to crush in ancient times, and it is development, science, and technology that the empire still wants to crush today. That has not changed. So that gives you a good indication of what to look for, right? Now, the U.S. Republic was a continuation of that sort of building, city builders principle. And FDR, JFK, and Lincoln were all exemplary of that. And what the processes that they actually got started were the processes were so powerful that they continued long after they were in power and or were alive. They were all killed, of course. Don't kid yourself. Anyone who is resisting empire today knows this. They do know this. So we have to take what they're saying in the public eye, public statements, and you know who they are associates with a grain of salt. We have to understand, you know, that this process is going on. Now, we have been under Harperism. We have been under this dictatorial, neocon, fascist apparatus. He is a Straussian. The Calgary school, where he actually went to school, was teaching Straussian philosophy. He came actually, like, for the longest time, it was very, very hard to get background on Harper. But then, of course, you know, the more fascist he got, the more leaks came out. And I mean, I'm sure you guys are aware of this, but he ruled Ottawa with an iron fist. Not one of his MPs or MLAs or anybody in the staffing in Ottawa could talk to the press or could talk to anyone outside of government without his approval. Prior to, I remember this, prior to his being elected, they had, media could go into, you know, into 24 Sussex or at Parliament. They had a lot more free reign to talk to, and you know, the way journalists do, as they should, corner politicians and question them. And he stopped that. Freedom of the press from day one got very restricted. All intelligence was extremely controlled. He was a micromanager of epic proportions, and you know, by all, I mean, I don't want to compare him. Like, narcissist is a term that gets thrown out around a lot. I don't know what his particular personality, you know, was, but he had some very. If you want to call him a dictator, you know, it's not far off.
He's total
dictator. His control of the media. Every time there would be a resistance inside the CDC or any of the other, well, not the other news stations as much because they're private, but
any government organization.
Any government organization, people stepped out of line, you were punished. This was how it was. Now, there's two things. One is where did he get, like, he was associated with this neo-fascist, you know, Straussian, but he was also a member of the Alliance Church in Calgary. Now, I can talk about this specifically because my family is also from this orientation. So I'll just give you a bit of my own insight. I won't belabor it, but this is a mixed group of people, but essentially they all come from very conservative backgrounds. It's a mix of people who have really been sucked into mythologies really bad. You cannot question whether or not the earth was created in 7 days. I mean, these are creationists, honestly. Now, I'm not saying that the whole Alliance Church that he belonged to was of this grain, but I do know that they are, like, a large portions of their membership has come from this kind of ideology. Create 7 days, that's it. You don't question that. It's very Old Testament. These people tell their children, you know, as I was, you're going to burn like, you know, like a fire for the rest of your life if you don't accept, you know. It's really cultish. It's very, very dangerous. And the difference between Bush and Harper, in my estimation, I could be wrong and it could come out differently. Bush also gathered the Christian fundamentalists around him, but I don't think he believed a word of it. He was a bullshitter from day one. Harper, on the other hand, could very well be a zealot. And yeah, and so what his, but the problem with these people, and I could say this as someone who's grown up in the Mennonite Church, is that they're all hypocrites. Even though they're zealots and they totally believe in the line, like, you know, Bible verse and chapter, all of that, they're still walking hypocrites because it's fundamentalism at its core. Yeah, like they're really messed up. You know, I'm rich and that's why, or no, sorry, God loves me and that's why I'm rich. This is a lot of problems in American fundamentalists. Like, seriously, this is what they believe. You know, because I pray every night. I mean, you know, and they're going to get their crowns in heaven and all this stuff. So, I mean, I can't imagine what goes on in that church. I'm just telling you right now that church is messed right up. So this was Harper, and so he had a fervor. I mean, he really believed in what he was doing, and he was going to carry it out. And I think what happened was this scared the shit out of the security establishment. I think it scared the shit out of, well, probably not the inside security establishment, but I mean, this country has not always been a conservative country. And believe it or not, despite the naysayers and the doubters, they're not all ideologically homogenous. They are not. There are a lot of differences. There are those differences that are for public consumption, and then there's those deeper differences that actually go against. And we can see this now in Paul's example of Kissinger saying, you know, what are you nuts? Don't go to war with Russia. Well, who's he? He's been promoting this New World Order crap for decades, and now he's saying this. So, you know, the bottom line, I think, is that these people are still human. No matter what, we have to remember that they do have their own motivations in there, and they all come from you know, different backgrounds, and it's those backgrounds that we have to look at. And so, you know, I could go into the Harper thing for a long time. We all know what we're saved from, I think, and it is a huge relief. I honestly think that, you know, now we're seeing the Canadian Human Rights Organization sent out a statement going into all of the changes that they would like to see the Human Rights Commission come back to, which changed under Harper. That's coming out, whistleblowing. You know, we're going to see whistleblowing on a massive level. 12 police officers. Was it in relation to the Indigenous?
Yeah, missing women.
Missing women. So 12, shortly after Harper was dethroned, which is pretty much what it was. 12 police officers were charged involved in crimes related to Indigenous women. Right? I mean, how long has that been on the table? So Obama called Trudeau to congratulate him and on his win, and this was his first day after the election, and he said, yeah, by the way, I'm taking our jets out of Syria and Iraq. You know, that's a bold move. That's a very bold move for a 43-year-old prime minister on his first day in. That can tell you either he's reckless and he's young, or he knows what he's doing. And I have a theory that he knows what he's doing, and I'll tell you why tonight, after. So, you know, this, I mean, every day has been a shock as to what he's doing, what he's going to do. There's a lot that he has to live up to, and if you look at the situation now, you can say, because I've heard this conspiracy theory too, that, you know, oh well, Harper was just making it, you know, he was just feeding it to him, because what could you possibly do, you know, I mean, you could just say something the right way and it would look better than what Harper was doing because he was just being so overtly fascist. You could look at it like that he was just setting it up. Sorry?
You hung out with Rob before.
No, but what I'm telling you,
It's a stretch.
but no. This is what I'm trying to tell you. I have had personal experience with these types of people. I've had personal experience on a executive level. I've had personal experience on a personal level with people like this. Yes, they're that stupid sometimes. And yes, they're really that screwed up. Now, they are not the oligarchy. They are the enemy, but they are not the oligarchy. It is the oligarchy that know how screwed up these people are. It is the oligarchy that knows that Obama is a screwed up, dysfunctional killer. They know that, and then they set him loose. He's not the one pulling the strings. He is their tool and puppet, absolutely. But that doesn't mean he needs to be continue to let loose. He needs to be taken in and brought down. Same thing with Harper. And that was done, fortunately. Now, we're putting together pieces of you know, what the Liberal Party did. And so there's two aspects to this. One is who is Justin Trudeau, and the other aspect to this is who are the Liberal Party, and what is the legacy of the Liberal Party in Canada. And there's two factions, and this is coming from someone who's participating again, but in the discussions that we have had with Liberal members, longtime Liberal members who have been quite active in the party, is that prior to Trudeau getting in on the majority, they were very split. There was a split within the Liberal Party. And if you think about it, it really makes sense because Canada has been a very conservative country overall. And this was actually commented on by, I can't remember what his name was, but it was a Russian official who was commenting to Sputnik about the Canadian election. And he made this comment, this characterization about Canada, and that the Liberals, you know, he was talking about the Liberal win, and he said, well, the Liberals have, you know, tended to say some things that seem to be more, you know, far right, but then again, it is Canada, and look what they're, you know, look what they're dealing with. So, a lot of what my personal assessment is that what Justin Trudeau, prior to, you know, his bully comment about Putin and all that, was electioneering, and I do also think that the struggle to get Harper out was so strong that they were trying to woo some of the conservative voters to vote for the Liberals. Now juxtapose this comment by Putin with the fact that, and you know, Trudeau, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, his father, is a very big factor in his life, but he is not just Pierre Elliott Trudeau's son. And he is Margaret's son as well, and Margaret comes from a very political family. Jim Sinclair was an MP in BC for 12 years. Prior to that, there was a long history. The Sinclair family is known to be quite political. Sorry, there's Margaret, Jim Sinclair. He spent a lot of years here, but now let's look at Trudeau, Pierre Elliott Trudeau. I did some history on him today, and to be honest, when you get into these conspiracy, you know, I don't want to say conspiracy, but when you go down this road and you're studying New World Order and, you know, the outright, which today is so overt and in your face, you tend to get blinders on and you don't look at people in the proper light. Trudeau was originally, Pierre Elliott was a communist. He admitted to being a communist to the wife of a U.S. official at some dinner back in the day when he first got into office. He was such a staunch supporter of Fidel Castro. When Pierre Elliott Trudeau died, Castro had he declared 3 days of mourning in Cuba. He flew to Canada to be the pallbearer at Trudeau's funeral. Very close ties. One of the pictures that's roaming around the internet right now is a picture of Castro and Margaret, and Castro is holding Justin Trudeau as a baby. That's one thing. Pierre Elliott Trudeau was also, what it appears, and I can't confirm this, it appears that he may have been in back channel with Russia, not on the same level as LaRouche, but he was certainly pro-Russian while the U.S. was in the height of their Cold War. And he was also very pro-Mao, which is terrible. But he had this communist bent, you know, he really, I'm not saying that was necessarily a good thing, okay? But compare that to Harper and Bush and this whole apparatus that's running things right now, and it's very different. We have to think about what kind of effect that did have on Justin Trudeau. Now, the other aspect is that also something that I read on Sputnik yesterday, which is very interesting, was that Justin and his son went to Russia recently on an unofficial visit. So it was not publicized that they went, but they spent time there. Likewise, when Justin was a young boy, Pierre Elliott also took his son, Justin, to the Soviet Union and traveled around. So, you know, you have to put these things into perspective. You know, the bully comment. Well, first of all, the CTV and the CBC misquoted him. That statement was actually, if you read exactly what he said, he said, "I will say these things to his face." And what he meant was, when I become prime minister, I will sit down and have a conversation with Vladimir Putin. It wasn't. That's not the same thing as, you know, Tony Abbott saying he's going to shirt front Putin. Like, totally qualitatively different, but that's how they're trying to, you know.
Didn't you call him a bully?
He did. No, he did.
Okay.
No, absolutely.
Is that just like a tactic to make him look a certain way? He doesn't actually mean it. He's Vladimir Putin knows this or something?
Well, okay, so a lot of what's coming out, no, you have to, this is what I'm saying, you have to really look at the other things that are being said, not just not just what's out there for our consumption, right? So a lot of the Russian officials are quite hopeful about this change in government. They're actually quite hopeful about it. And it's not to say that this is all said and done. By no means am I trying to say that this is definitive or conclusive, that Justin Trudeau is some sort of, you know, ideal image. There are no ideals, and as a matter of fact, this is precisely what I'm trying to get across in this, you know, political dialogue. Being a political activist is, you know, you have to be able to look into the future, but you have to be able to understand human behavior, and that's so key when you're at a table on the street. It's key when you're talking with MPs and MLAs, because, like I said, they're still people, and the revolution will be found, the Renaissance will be found in the ongoing commitment to ideas that have shaped our past and the evolution of those ideas that will shape our future. These ideas are a tangible concept. It's only tangible when you are talking about it with people in actionable positions. It is only through the dialogue and debate, but most importantly, in that participation with political actors, that these ideas become real. Then you figure out actually how to make it happen. It's no longer just something that you wish for. You know, it's like looking through the Sears catalog. Oh, I sure wish I had everything on page 10. And then it never gets there. You know, I mean, it's like we get into these wishful thinking kind of modes, and then it's always unreachable because you never get your boots on and go to the store and say, I want that one, and you take it home. I mean, it's literally wanting it enough to make it happen. And then when you go through that process of making it happen, and that's why watching this is really going to like hit it home for you. But you know, shaping this is what an activist does in the context of shaping history. And sorry, just 1 second. You know, it's just it has to be it has to be from a place of rigor. And sometimes these actors of resistance will be very ambiguous and vague, and so that can be taken two ways. Now, you know, I want to, like I said, I want to preface this assessment of Trudeau and where he comes from and what his legacy actually is. And some of the things that he was talking about was debt is a good thing. Compare that with the Conservatives and the NDP, who are both saying we need a balanced budget. What is a balanced budget? I mean, seriously, in this day and age, what is a balanced budget? We know that Harper balanced the budget by taking money from every social program that was out there just so he could say the books were zero. I mean, what do you have to do? What is the point of having a balanced budget if your people are suffering? What Trudeau addressed was the austerity measures that the people were suffering under. Now, what he did not say, which is very important, is, you know, one of the ways to fund social programs is to, and infrastructure, because he talked a lot about infrastructure, was to renationalize the Bank of Canada. I am pretty damn sure that he's well aware of the Supreme Court ruling on the Bank of Canada, because it was his father that dismantled the Bank of Canada. So, you know, here we really have to ask ourselves. Now, the person who has the judgment that Trudeau is his father's son, and he's going to continue his father's legacy, and he's going to keep on, you know, raping, pillaging, and the TPP. Well, we don't know. We don't know. But what I would say to that is that Justin Trudeau is Prime Minister at a time in history when the level of resistance to empire and oligarchical principles that have been dominating the planet for 50 years is very powerful. And I won't sit back and say that, oh, the vote's over, let's watch what he does. It's our job to go in there and talk to these people and talk to Trudeau if we can. We have a movement in Ottawa or in Montreal who's very close. We have the ability to make this connection and get these ideas across. You know, our literature doesn't say, we are the resistance. You know, I mean, our literature is talking about science and development, building bridges, Glass-Steagall, responsible banking. You know, now here's a quote. This is an example of something very, very ambiguous. So this could go either way, honestly. But and if you look at the history, he is really not far off the mark. He says, Justin Trudeau. This was from this is what we took when we went to a Liberal outing. Not an outing, sorry, a presentation. It was at their South Okanagan West Kootenay debate. Canada is a grand unfinished project. It is up to us, together with all Canadians, to build the country that we want. That has some very serious, you know, sovereignty tones. And Canada is, from the sense of you know, a republic, Canada is, and sovereignty, Canada is an unfinished project. From the sense of being a colony of Britain, I would also say that it's an unfinished project as well. And this is something, I'm putting this out there. It's something that I'm coming to an understanding of, and I think more research needs to be made. Trudeau referenced Wilfrid Laurier in his acceptance speech. We need to look more into what we're discovering now that we're in discussions with people from the Liberal Party, is that there is a lot more resistance to British policies and to empire policies than we have previously thought and or known. But just to get into, because I'm sure everybody's really curious about, you know, how did the Liberals pull it off? Well, They could have, if the overwhelming majority of Canadians, so why did they vote for Liberals instead of the NDP? There are several reasons for that. I don't think it's one thing in particular, but I do know that a lot of Conservatives swung their vote from Conservative to Liberals. That was one thing. And so strategic voting was played a huge role in this election. Now, what does strategic voting mean? It means you're voting to get someone out. You're not voting necessarily for that party. Was there some electioneering going on? Abso-freaking-lutely. I am sure that there was, but what was the intention? And what were the people behind the scenes looking at when they did that? Now, when I say electioneering, I'm not calling election fraud. We had the OSCE observers at this election because Harper has been accused twice before of rigging elections, sending people to the wrong polling stations, and ruined ballots. So the OSCE did, in fact, monitor this. He knew that they were going to be there, and I'm sure that that had a role in the fact that we haven't so far found any fraud in the election process itself.
Actually, I did hear about some marked ballots.
There were some marked ballots, but see, the voter turnout was incredible, and also the level of people's awareness about those issues, because the reason that they found those marked ballots was because, or the reason we found out about those marked ballots was because they were brought to the attention of the election people. So
the OSCE.
The OSCE they observed. It was a random thing, like they weren't. You know, I think they sent observers to random locations across Canada, and I think it was only like 5 or 6 different polling stations. And then they sent a report in 2 days after the election. So I have yet to actually see that, so I want to take a look, but so far nothing major. But as far as so strategic voting, I mean, we know everybody hated Harper except for Alberta and Saskatchewan apparently, and that is a Bible Belt, by the way. Alberta, Saskatchewan, and half of Saskatchewan and southern Manitoba is all Bible Belt. It's, yeah. You want to talk about Old Testament and creation? You go to southern Manitoba. That's where you'll find them all.
Isn't there a huge number of ridings in southern Ontario outside of Toronto?
Southwestern Ontario always goes conservative.
Yeah.
Always.
They managed 100 seats.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they're all farmers. They're all 4th, 5th generation farmers, and their father voted conservative and their grandfather voted conservative. They vote conservative.
Why does Alberta go NDP provincially and then conservative?
It's a quandary, honestly.
Nobody knows that answer.
No, but part of the issue is that the NDP, the provincial election happened when the oil prices were really taking a hit, very, very hard, and we don't know, but I think they were desperate, and I think it was like a big FU to the Conservatives, basically. But so Harper has now, resigned, and the funny thing is his mayor is Ismaili Liberal, his premier is NDP, and his prime minister is a Liberal, which is really funny. But
can you repeat that?
So Stephen Harper,
Calgary.
shortly after he gave his concession speech, he called the head of the Conservative Party and said, "I'm resigning, find an interim leader." And so now he's an MP in Calgary Heritage area in Calgary, and so he's a conservative MP in a city that is liberal, run by an Ismaili. The mayor is Ismaili, the premier is NDP, and the prime minister is liberal. So he's not in his element. It should be quite funny. But so these are things that we're going to be looking at. Yes.
What you need to look at is the connection that Paul brought up to the change in the political situation that Putin put into place, because the world has changed. When I was standing for election in 1994, I think, the Liberal Party was saying free trade. No free trade, no free trade, no free trade, until we came to the week of the election, and they said, oh, maybe free trade is good. And as soon as they were elected, oh yeah, free trade, we need to go free trade. So we have a 900 person Privy Council that can change directions.
The Privy Council,
but I don't think they have the power anymore, because Putin changed the world. When Justin gets told by the Privy Council to do this and this and this, he may have the power now to say, well, who are you guys?
okay, so one thing,
we have to look at
absolutely,
in that light.
I haven't brought that up yet, but the Privy Council is a huge factor. It is also the shadow government of this country, as well as the Australian and any other part of the Dominion of British Empire, right? So that is a huge factor. What we do know is that Justin Trudeau actually had to go to the Privy Council to get all the intelligence for abroad and all, you know.
Does everyone understand the significance of that? Trudeau went to get all of the information on security and on the running of the government. It was not within the government. He went to the Privy Council, and they said, yeah, we'll get it for you. We need a day or two to give you this information, and then they gave him the information. The Privy Council was holding all of that information.
There was,
These are non-elected people that were appointed by the British Crown in this country.
There was another article that really expounds on this process itself. I believe it was in Maclean's, and it was on the transition from Harper now to Trudeau. And this individual, I believe he was a political analyst from university in Ontario somewhere. He said that he has never seen such a rigorous task list of transitional to-do lists in this, other than this period of time. It is so detailed and like long. It's so lengthy that you have the transition of power now from Harper to Trudeau. So I wish I could find it. I think I have it saved in my favorites, but it is very important to look up Privy Council transition.
Privy Council transition?
Yeah, if you type in Privy Council plus transition of power, something like that, into Google, you'll find it. So yeah, I mean, the idea is here, what does this tell you about the power structure that's going on and the factions within Canada? Now, just before I forget, there's also another thing to just to consider. Jean Chrétien being, if you look at his history, he has been very influential in keeping Canada out of the U.S. neocon apparatus. Harper was handing it to them with a silver platter. Jean Chrétien came out quite openly against actually even liberal policies in the past that were pro, as did Pierre Elliott Trudeau, that were pro, neocon. But lately, and I tell you, when I saw that Chrétien went to Russia to visit Putin, that the liberal campaign shifted. That was in May. But he stepped up. He started actually going around campaigning with Trudeau, and I think his mother did as well. And when that happened, when he became more public and he was in favor of Putin's actions in Syria, so it's not just the BRICS. It's not just this process. That was a clincher deal. Putin going into Syria itself was also huge, and so that shifted the Liberals. Now, the last thing I'll say is just that I think what was most significant about this election was that, and also what's significant about Canada, because really what this represents is the changes that are going on within Canada. It's twofold. The demographics in Canada has changed a lot, And we do know that the Liberals had a very, very strong ethnic vote from the Chinese community, from the Sikh community, as well as other groups who were very much scared of the niqab thing coming from the NDP and the Conservatives. But more significantly, now I have to confirm this, but the NDP, in light of the NDP's utter failure, I mean, they really, really did so bad. The middle class has traditionally been a union, and the unions have been really marginalized. They've been, neutralized, essentially. I don't think, as a country, we truly appreciate the depth of failure that the unions have gone under, both the Harper government and just all these free trade deals. The unions practically have no voice anymore. And we do also know that they have been infiltrated by the Greens. They have had operation after operation, and we saw it heavily during Occupy. So what is the middle, because it is predominantly a middle class that voted the Liberals in. They were anti-austerity. They were anti-fascism. They were anti-Bill C-51. They were against, we know what they were against. So who are they? Does the middle class now, is it now represented more by the ethnic vote than it is by the unions? Now, that's something that we have to look into. And it's very sad that the unions are in the position that they're in to this level today. Now, I'll just end with, in the context, as I already said, in the context of Putin's actions in Syria, in context with the manipulation and the fear and the voter suppression, Canadians of all backgrounds have been watching, with horror, the effects of 9/11 policies on the U.S. And that has not been lost on Canadians. I think we have all been seeing the deterioration of civil rights and liberties in the U.S. and we did not fall for that. So I really have to say I'm very happy and proud of that. But the job is not over, and that's what we really have to consider. This is not, let's all party and get back to work. I mean, this is ongoing. We really, now more than ever, is the time to bring the world land bridge up, to get the Liberal government to understand that, and Trudeau is very pro-China apparently, and we have to say, well, is the Bering Strait on the table then? Can we get this done? Let's work on it. So Canada, now what do we have? Canada will no longer be propping up Obama and this neocon. It's very clear that he's not a neocon. Could there be better relations with Russia? We do know that most of the BRICS nations have, and a lot of countries immediately sent Trudeau congratulations, and there's not just a sigh of relief for Canadian citizens, there's a sigh of relief in other countries. They are expressing this in their tweets and in their letters of congratulations. They are happy, they're relieved. What else does it say? The faction within the British establishment, and it could be significant, of Kissinger's statement, we don't know, but there are factions that understand that the consequences of nuclear confrontation with Russia will kill everyone. There is no such thing as a limited nuclear war. There's no such thing. And you could hear that in Putin's speech at Valdai. So, as a movement, as activists here in Vancouver, we will be making appointments with MPs and MLAs. We will be getting our policies and our concepts, and we will be conveying our ideas in an actionable and tangible way, and continuing a dialogue with a saner Canadian government. I've said this before, the NDP, I didn't really get into it, but I would characterize them as schizophrenic. They really is a green non-development thing and a blue union thing. It's like, what end is up? They were very confused. And versus the fascist Harpers, I mean, we really do have an opening with the Liberals, and we need to look at it as that. It's an opening, and it's much more positive opening than we could have had with the NDP or the Conservative. So, thank God. Thank you.
I have something else to say. Canada has, Trudeau, his father, was a back channel to China and Russia before he became Prime Minister and after he became Prime Minister. So you have a situation where Canada might become, with Trudeau as the new Prime Minister, he might become a back channel for the U.S. to Russia, and not to China, but to Russia, to lessen the, and also to put pressure on the other British elements and so forth. So it's not clear. It's not clear. I'm just saying that it's not clear how this is going to go, but we do know that Canada will not be exempt from the financial collapse. And we do know that Canada is going to have to do something similar to what we're proposing in the United States. And we do know that a government, if the Canadian government decides to do something, they're less encumbered in doing it. And so we're going to be working on getting the idea of how they're going to clean up the banking system, how they're going to create credit, much more directly to layers of the Liberal Party, because the crisis of the financial system will occur in this period, and the Liberal Party will be in a position, or Trudeau will be in a position to act decisively if the consensus is, and they have a clear idea of what it is. Maybe they won't, but that's what we have. That's the other side of what we're going to do.
That's an opportunity.
And I forgot,
So
exactly, an opportunity, but also I forgot to mention the Ukraine situation, because I tried to look up connections between Kiev government officials and the Liberal Party itself.
Yep.
And there aren't very, even though there are like, you know, Ukrainian individuals who are in the Liberal Party and did win their seats. We have yet to see how that dynamic is going to play out. It's certainly not going to be the, you know, giving Poroshenko roses when he gets to Ottawa. I don't think it'll be quite like that. Hang on, Ralph.
You mentioned that two groups are forming Liberal Party. Right? Can you describe what kind of two groups?
No, there's a split of opinion in the Liberal Party. And this has happened over, I think, many years. One of the significant times that this was a factor was when Jean Chrétien was in power, and Paul Martin. Paul Martin is, contrary to belief, like he's a globalist. He put NAFTA in place. He put you know, GST. He was a financial architect of a lot of the problems that we're seeing now, and but I don't think that Jean Chrétien was necessarily on the same page, and you could see this very much so in the sponsorship scandal when it was the referendum was on the table and Quebec was voting to separate, and they found out after that Chrétien did some deals with, you know, ad companies and things like that, which were quite illegal. I mean, he shouldn't have done it. His argument was that he was trying to keep this country together. And to be quite honest, I mean, I don't know the level of criminality. I don't think it was as bad as they were making it out to seem. But so he really screwed Paul Martin over when Paul Martin took over the Prime Minister's position, and was one of the reasons that Paul Martin didn't stay in that position very long. Because then Jean Chrétien dumped the sponsorship scandal on Paul Martin. So anyways, that's besides the point. The details are unimportant, but there's a split. There's an ideological split within the Liberal Party, and that is indicative of because, you know, as I said in the beginning, Canada is a very conservative country, and so generally in Canada, people, when they're really, mad at the Conservatives for, having a bad economy, they vote Liberal. And when they're pissed off at the Liberals after they've been in power for 9 years, then they vote Conservative. So it's like this flip-flopping, and then in the NDP, you're like a sideshow. It's too bad, really, but does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so what was this task list that you referred to? Is that
it's a bureaucratic process.
Sweeping it, getting the broom up and sweeping up a bunch of bureaucrats and putting in?
No, it's a transition list. So it's a transition from the Harper government to the Liberal government. So Harper hands over all of his powers to Justin Trudeau, right? And the cabinet switch over and all of that. So it's a task list that has to be done anyways.
Yes.
But the characterization of it in this article was that it was the most detailed task and rigorous task list that they've ever seen. So it tells you the amount of things that are A, going on, B, the amount of stuff that they have to, that Harper's done, that, or what are they covering up for Harper? I mean, we know that he had paper shredders at, his office in Ottawa 3 days before the election happened. Paper shredders. I mean, come on, what's he shredding? I mean, I think the level of criminality of the Harper government we have only seen the tip of the iceberg. It's going to be outrageous what comes out. And people, like whistleblowers, are now coming out, and there's just this sense of relief. I said this before you guys got here, but the sense of, collectively, I think the whole country just went, oh, thank God, we didn't realize how bad it really was until he was out. But
you were looking at it, you were following the election process. Did the Liberal Party really have a stand on the environmental issue against the green agenda? I haven't heard very much on it. And what is going to be the...
sorry, the NDP? Or the Liberals?
The Liberal Party. Are we going to sort of reverse some of the old crap?
Well, you know what, to be honest, I know that he is going to the climate change summit. I know that he's asked Elizabeth May to join him. I don't see him, I could be wrong, but I don't see him as being some sort of rabid environmentalist. I think there's enough resistance and debate about the environmentalist issues going on. And the environmentalist, and this is another important thing for everybody to know, is that the environmentalist movement itself is very split right now. There's a group out of the United States called eco-modernists. They are former environmentalist activists who are now, they're saying, look, this, hate humanity, anti-development, kill the third world policy is stupid, it doesn't work. So these eco-modernists have actually come out with a manifesto, and there's some very highly prominent individuals who have contributed to the manifesto and who are actively a part of this. And I'm sure that Elizabeth May knows this because David Suzuki and Naomi Klein denounced them outright, said, don't even read that. And the eco-modernists are embracing nuclear power. They're talking about actually using technology and development in a positive way. We don't have to, all go back to our outhouse. Let's get real here, because that's what they're talking about. I mean, they're really deindustrialization. The rabid greenies want deindustrialization, and anybody who gets involved with it long enough will understand that. And when they do, they're going to understand that their solutions really don't make a lot of sense.
Well, they have high hopes for the Paris conference, and I don't think they'll get too far.
No.
And with Canada no longer being on the bandwagon, it should make a difference.
Yeah.
Lord Moncton, ironically, came out with something like a week before the Canadian elections, and he said, "Oh no, Harper's going to lose his election, and then the climate thing is sunk. We're all sunk because Harper was." I mean, you know what? Here's the thing: it's so extreme, right? Like we can't have rabid, development without any. I mean, this digging up oil crap is really stupid. I mean, we could be going with nuclear power, using energy dense methods of producing energy. And we're still slaves to this oil system that is ripping apart, most of the Middle East.
I thought Lord Monkton was quite prominent in like the fraud of global warming.
No, he is.
So why 3 weeks before would he kind of bemoan the loss of the Harper?
Because the Harper government was not on board with the climate change. They really hated the environmentalists.
So he was. So it's his way of saying.
Yeah. It was just funny, because clearly he doesn't have any understanding of what's actually going on in Canada. Because Lord Monkton is not a bad guy. He's a very good guy, but. Yeah. Some things, yeah.
How did your effort to support the independent go? Because now that the election's over, I don't know what you did all summer, how long you were there.
So Brian, Scott and I went up to Penticton twice and visited Brian, helped him. Kevin also went one day. We helped him organize with a table, and we helped him at the debates. Now, unfortunately, and this is very, very sad, Brian was locked out of every single public debate. They did not even let him go up. No, I shouldn't say that. Every single public popular debate. So there was other debates that went on, like some at nursing homes and some at high schools and things like that, which were like, not very well controlled, as they shouldn't be. But so he did participate in those, and he sat at the table. With the guy who won was the NDP candidate, and he, the comments that we heard from people on his platform alone, which is extremely well written and well thought out, and one of the only sane conversation that was actually going on in Canada, developing the Arctic, banking regulation, things that. He wasn't saying anything radical. He wasn't saying anything, he certainly wasn't talking about, aliens on the moon. He was so well spoken and really was well received, and that was the problem. His message was making an impact because all of the people that we were talking to really liked him, and already, because he'd been working with the local papers for like 10 months up to a year prior. He was sending in letters to the editor. They all knew, all the major editors of all the major papers in the valley knew that he was running. They knew what his platform was, and they shut him up. So that tells you how far.
Also, so you know that there's a rabid bunch of loyalists in Penticton. Retirees, and they're straight almost out of Britain itself. They've got the full accent and whatnot. Yeah. We were confronted by, a Canadian loyalist who came up to the table, saw our sign, having us break with the bricks, and she just kind of taunted us and said, I'm a loyalist, or
I guess I won't be welcome here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I said, well, you must not know much about the Queen then. She didn't say anything. She didn't want to get into it. And she turned away from me as if I might attack her from behind or something. Kind of thing. And I said, let's just talk about it. But she wanted to make it known that this is a loyalist town. People here are, they're very much.
So there was no coverage of the independent in the press?
So there was coverage in some of the independent papers. The Okanagan a lot of people, and he did print his. He responded to a question every week. All the candidates answered a question in 250 words or less to a couple of the major papers, and so he did. So he did the ideas he did get out, and he shifted the debate. I think what happened was they didn't want to have to talk about those things at a major public debate because they would have come up. Just like they don't want to talk about Glass-Steagall at the Democratic debate, but they couldn't They couldn't not have a democratic debate forever. So, but in the same way, right? You know, it's that no, we can't talk about that. And furthermore, none of the other candidates could talk about it. None of them they're not competent enough to.
Yeah.
So.
How well did he do with the votes?
You know what? We have to. I haven't touched base with. He got 300. Really? Oh,
Really?
that's great.
300.
300. It's not bad.
That's
Yeah,
great.
that's not bad.
I've supported candidates that got like 50, so
Yeah,
it's not bad.
that's good.
It's not the
That's
point,
good.
though.
No, it's not. And I think it was actually quite discouraging. So just as an update. So what we're going to do, Brian has out of his campaigning and out of all of his activity that's been going on, he's going to be getting the people who have come around him now.
Yeah, I'm gonna call him. I didn't call him.
In a meeting. So we're going to try and start a regular meeting in Penticton. And anyone from here is welcome to come up with us. Kevin, Scott and I will definitely be going to give him a hand. The biggest thing, you know, I'll just say this for us here as well. The biggest thing is having a network and having a support network when you're digging into some of these ideas. Brian doesn't have anybody there except for himself. And just so you know, Brian was an activist with the movement up until, when did LaRouche go to jail? 98?
88, 89.
89.
89. So up until the point that LaRouche was thrown in jail, he was a full-time activist member for like 15 full years, and then he quit, and he came back here and, you know, got a regular career and all of that stuff. So you know, he doesn't have a network. There's no other people, you know, who are political activists around there that have the same orientation. So any help that he can get, either online or you know, through Facebook or otherwise, is going to be very useful for him to help.
All right. Last announcement, I just want to just let you guys know that there's a new pamphlet on the green global warming scares, population reduction, not science. And it's